You're listening to The Voluntary Life, where you can hear ideas for finding freedom in an unfree world. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to connect with the show and hear all past episodes. Here's your host, Jake.
Hi, it's Jake here. Welcome to The Voluntary Life. This week's episode is about parenting. I got a very interesting question in the Voluntary Life Facebook community. So I'm going to read this listener question and then provide my own thoughts on it. It's from a woman and she wrote, "Hi Jake, I would like to hear your thoughts on making the decision to have a child. I am 33 years old and there are lots of expectations on this one. I find it difficult to escape the identity trap and to know for myself if I want to become a parent or not. I know it's a big one and it is personal, but your podcast is probably the only place which talks about parenting from a unique perspective, different from the norm. I will be curious to hear your view, especially as a new parent." So what this listener is asking is how to tell whether or not you want to become a parent. And that's a really important topic in its own right. I just want to make the point that that's not the same question as how to tell whether you're ready to be a parent. Because you might want to have kids, but not yet be ready, not be in the right relationship or not have other things in place to have kids. And theoretically, you could be in a great position to have kids, but just not want to have kids. So the question we're tackling in this episode is how to tell if you yourself want to be a parent. And the listener who wrote this question referenced the identity trap. That's the belief that you should live your life according to what other people expect of you, rather than what you yourself want. If you haven't heard it, there was a whole episode about that recently, which was episode 290 called Escaping the Identity Trap. And this listener has obviously been thinking about how to determine the things that she wants for herself, specifically in reference to this question, does she really want to become a parent? Now, when she posted this in the Voluntary Life community on Facebook, another listener pointed her to a previous episode that I did about how to tackle family pressure, about questions like having kids and getting married and this kind of thing. And that was episode 268, which is called A Listener Question About Family Pressure, Expensive Weddings and Kids. And I do think that's a relevant episode for this whole question. But in this episode, I'm going to talk about how you decide for yourself if you want to become a parent. And what I can do is I can tell you my own experience of how I came to decide that I wanted to be a parent. Because I did not always want to be a parent. And in fact, I totally avoided even thinking about this topic for a long time. So I'll share with you my own experience in knowing what I really wanted in this aspect of life. Because this is a huge decision, has a massive impact on the course of your life. So of course, it's really important to know whether or not this is something that you genuinely want for yourself. And I think it's great that you're asking yourself this question, as opposed to just having kids because it's kind of what you do, which is what some people do. I think it's great to ask yourself the question. You do have a choice about whether or not to pursue becoming a parent, but how do you know if you really want it? So the first part of my experience that I want to share with you is that I went from never thinking about this topic to thinking about it a lot. When I was in my 20s, I completely avoided thinking about kids. I found the whole question of kids and starting a family to be really abstract and something I couldn't really connect to, and I just didn't want to think about. I just avoided it completely. One of the main reasons that I avoided thinking about it was that I did not want to become like my own parents. I had a very unstable childhood. My parents were never married. They broke up when I was very young. They got together with partners who I did not feel welcome with. I went back and forth between two homes, one of which was a squat. So I had a very unstable childhood. And I didn't want to have kids because I didn't want to inflict on them what I experienced from that kind of unstable childhood. I know a lot of people have similar experiences. Their own childhoods were such a mess that they just avoid the topic of children completely. And I think it is honorable to not want to perpetuate bad parenting. It's honorable to not want to do things to kids that you didn't appreciate having experienced yourself. But for myself, when I really started to think about this question of becoming a parent, maybe having kids, what it would mean and so forth, I came to the realization that it would be possible for me to have kids and to do it differently. You don't have to do the same things that your parents did. You can do things completely differently. if you're willing to put the work in and to really think about this and develop your own principles and your own approach to parenting. And it is a lot of work, but it was a very important realization to me to have the confidence to realize, no, I can choose to change the pattern of parenting that I experienced and do it differently myself. And I came to that realization because I started thinking about this question, and I consciously stopped avoiding the topic, and started to really think about it for myself. And for me, that means writing stuff down. I always know when I'm avoiding thinking about something because I don't write anything down. I know that I have actually put real thought into something if I journal about it and write things down and do mind maps or use whatever other tools I can to get these ideas out of my head and really commit them into words in front of me that I can then confront myself with and think about and have that conversation with myself about. And that is what I recommend that you do. Don't avoid thinking about this. Have the difficult conversations with yourself. Ask yourself difficult questions about whether or not you really want to be a parent. Ask yourself why you want to be a parent, what your motivations are. Ask yourself what you're afraid of. Ask yourself what it actually involves. What are your responsibilities going to be if you do this? What will be a successful outcome for you? What would make you a great parent and would make you feel good about the experience? What would make you a lousy parent and would make you feel bad about having made that choice? And I recommend you commit your thoughts to paper, or if you're paperless like me, to a computer screen. Write it down. It's hard to think about this topic because it does confront you with your own experience of how your parents parented you. And if you really want to think about it, you're going to have to evaluate that critically. You don't necessarily have to challenge your parents and challenge the decisions that they made in real life, but you do have to confront them inside your head. You do have to evaluate your parents' decisions and decide, what did they do that worked really well for you? And what did they do that did not work well for you? And what does that leave you thinking about the experience of becoming a parent and whether or not you want it? Because the whole idea of thinking about this for yourself is to make this your own parenting project, not the perpetuation of somebody else's parenting ideas. If you're going to be a parent, you want to be a parent on your terms. So that's my first recommendation, is to really think about it a lot. I read lots of books about parenting. I did lots of journaling. This is in my 30s. I really started thinking about this a lot. The second thing that I want to share with you about my own experience of deciding whether I wanted to be a parent or not was that I went from never talking about the topic of parenting and kids in any of my relationships in my 20s to talking about it a lot in my 30s. I had various girlfriends in my 20s, and I don't remember any conversations about parenting and kids. It was a taboo topic for me, and I think it was for them too. I don't even remember speaking hypothetically about the topic of parenting per se. I know that for myself, I was just avoiding thinking about it. And so I definitely didn't want to bring it up as a topic because I didn't want to open the doorway to possibly having kids. And the result of that was that I got no useful information from my partners about parenting and the possibility of this major project. And the thing is, if you are considering whether or not you want to become a parent, you're not the only one who's going to be involved in this project. There's going to be another person involved in this project, and their role is going to be absolutely crucial to the success of this project for you as a parent. So you've got to talk to your partner about parenting, because you're not going to do this alone. There's going to be somebody else involved. So when I started to become interested in becoming a parent, I talked about parenting a lot with my then girlfriend. This was in my 30s. And I must admit, it was pretty tough talking about it because it did expose big differences in our approach towards children. By talking about it, it became clear that we had very different attitudes towards things like whether or not it's okay to spank kids. And one of the outcomes of having those conversations was that I realized that if I did want to have kids, it wasn't going to be with the person that I was with. And that was pretty tough. But I'm glad that we had those conversations, because I think if we hadn't had those conversations and we'd ended up having kids together, it would not have been good for either of us or the kids. When I started my relationship with Hannah, who's now my wife, we talked about parenting a lot, even in the beginning of our relationship. We talked about what makes a good parent, the kind of parenting that we'd experienced as kids. We talked about things like whether or not it's okay to spank kids, what we think the concept of spoiling a child is, and what we make of that idea. We talked about all sorts of things. And this was long before we actually had any plan to have children. We just talked about parenting. And that's what I recommend that you do with your partner. Entertain the hypothetical discussion about parenting practices, what it means to be a parent, what it would be like, what you would do differently to your own parents, these kinds of things. The third experience that I want to tell you about from myself is that I went from viewing the idea of becoming a parent as a kind of inconvenience or side project to viewing it as an incredibly meaningful life experience to have. I grew up around the idea that children are kind of the passengers in their parents' lives, and the main drama is the life of their parents, where their parents want to go, what their parents are concerned with and interested in. The parents are focused on that main drama, and the kids are just kind of along for the ride. That was the attitude that I absorbed in the beginning of my life. And I thought that kids were just kind of a side project that you have to fit in somewhere along the way while you focus on the main things that are of concern to you. And I now have a completely different perspective on parenting. Now I view parenting as probably the most meaningful thing that I will do with my life, the most meaningful project. And the important thing is that I know why I'm willing to forego the things that I have to forego in order to be a parent. Because one of the most important aspects of rational thinking is knowing that you can't have your cake and eat it. Whatever decision you're going to make, you have to forego some other opportunities. So by becoming a parent, I'm going to write significantly less books, and I'm going to do significantly less other things that I could have done if I hadn't become a parent. And I'm absolutely fine with that, because I've come to value this experience so highly and think that it's so meaningful that I'm very happy with knowing that I have forgone lots of opportunities in order to do this. And I know that when I get to the end of my life, if I imagine myself as an old man looking back, I won't regret having forgone those other opportunities in order to become a parent. And that's what I suggest you do, is have a think about how meaningful it would be to you to become a parent, how you view the whole idea of being a parent compared to the other things that you could spend your time doing. If you treat being a parent just as a side project that you're going to try and fit in around other things that are more important to you, I think you're going to be a bad parent, and I think you're not going to enjoy it, and neither are your kids, and it's not going to work for you or them. So I recommend that you evaluate how important it is to you and either decide that it is something truly meaningful and important or not, in comparison to the other things that you might do with your life. And of course, that means that you really have to think about what you want to do with this precious time that you've got, what your alternative life projects are, and whether they're more meaningful than the experience of becoming a parent. What else have you got planned? If you are planning a mission to Mars, or if you're planning to cure cancer, maybe you've got some kind of really meaningful life project that becoming a parent is not as meaningful to you. In which case, maybe you're going to be more fulfilled by pursuing that major life goal, whatever it is, and not becoming a parent. But if the alternative is less significant to you, if the alternative is that you do more work and you become regional sales manager, then you really need to ask yourself, well, how meaningful is that to you compared to becoming a parent? Basically, have you got something better to do with your time that's going to be more fulfilling and meaningful for you? And the way to decide that is to think about what you have to forego to either become a parent or do this other project, and think about yourself as an old person facing death and evaluate which of those you think you'll regret not having done. And of course, the answer is really yours to make. It's entirely up to you. There are many people who've lived amazing lives and done incredible things who didn't have kids. And it's a legitimate choice to make if you want to do that. But it's important to be conscious of what is really meaningful to you and make sure that you're doing that. And not just doing something else that ultimately in the end isn't going to be very fulfilling. I mean, as you can tell from the way that I talk about it, I'm incredibly happy to be a parent. I find it to be the most amazing, wonderful experience. I'm loving it. And I've spoken about it on previous episodes. In particular, episode 283 is me and my wife together talking about our experience of parenting so far. And we're going to do more episodes like that and talk more about it as well. So I've come to view it as probably the most meaningful project that I will undertake in my life. But it's up to you to decide what's going to give you meaning and what's going to feel fulfilling to you. So I just wanted to share those three things with you from my own experience of thinking about whether or not I wanted to be a parent. I went from never thinking about it at all to thinking about it a lot. I went from never talking about it in any of my relationships to talking about it a lot. And I went from not valuing parenting as a meaningful thing to do at all to valuing it as probably the most meaningful thing that I will do with my life. If you want to decide whether or not you want to be a parent, think about it a lot and demonstrate to yourself that you've done good thinking about it by writing stuff down. Ask yourself the difficult questions and talk to yourself about it. Talk to your partner about this a lot. Entertain the hypothetical and discuss parenting in general with all the provisos in the world that, look, you just want to talk about this subject generally. This doesn't mean you want to have kids. It's just something you're interested and curious about talking about. What makes a good parent? What does your partner think? And so forth. Have those discussions and get them started. And thirdly, evaluate for yourself how valuable you think parenting is. If this is something that you don't think is very meaningful or significant, but you just want to kind of fit in along the way, then I don't think you really want to be a parent. But if you do value it and you do think it's a meaningful experience, then you can be willing to forego the other opportunities that you will have to forego if you want to become a parent. I have lots of exciting news and announcements to make about the podcast coming soon, but that's where I'm going to leave it for this week. So I hope you find that helpful, and I'd love to know what you think.
Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Life. If you have feedback about the show, please email jake@thevoluntarylife.com. If you enjoyed this program, please share the podcast with your friends or click the donate button on thevoluntarylife.com.